Okay, here are some other very important concepts that we're going to be talking about throughout this entire term. And one of the most important is this concept of mutability, which is just a fancy way of saying constant change. They believe that everything upon the earth is constantly going through change, and often the changes are not positive, often they're negative. In fact, that's the kind of change that they're most concerned with. Nobody really stops to think about good changes, changes that take place and result in some good. We usually focus on bad changes because we don't want bad changes. So mutability is an important concept. In fact, when I teach the class in the classroom, I always tell the students this is the one word you will not forget. Practically every single thing we will read this term will deal in some way or another with the theme of mutability. Everything on earth is mutable. Only God is permanent. Only God is immutable. And that's one of the reasons God, the Christian God, was so attractive to these people. They lived very hard lives. If they got sick, there was no medicine. If they broke a limb, you couldn't just run to the hospital and have it quickly fixed. Um, Many of these people did not live beyond the age of 40, and they were lucky if they got to be that old. Infant mortality was incredibly high. So think about the fact that everything for these people was constantly changing, and it was changing usually for the worse. We have so many modern conveniences. We have electricity, we have air conditioning, we have modern medicine. We have so much easier lives than these people had. And one of the reasons is that we've been able to some degree to control mutability, but we can't control it completely. All of us are going to age. All of us are going eventually to die. You folks in this generation may be the first human beings of whom that is not true, but up until this generation, everybody who has ever lived has died. And usually they have died a slow, painful death due to sickness that could not be treated. So, again, this is another reason that mutability was so important to these folks. They lived mutable lives, and they were looking for ways to overcome that mutability. And the Christian God offered the hope of eternal happiness or eternal punishment. And whether or not you spent eternity uh, in a happy state in heaven with God was pretty much up to you. It depended to a great degree upon the choices that you made in life, whether you used your reason properly. Okay, in fact, let's jump down to the third item here, reason versus passion. This is another really crucial concept. Reason is the ability to think clearly and then choose on the basis of one's thoughts. It's perhaps the greatest gift that God gives to man. Since God himself is reason, just as he's also goodness, truth, and beauty personified, these qualities can't be defined except by reference to God. So God is pure reason. He never makes a mistake. Anything that he thinks, anything that he says, anything that he decides is by definition reasonable. Reason is the quality that links human beings with God. It's that little touch of the divine that we carry around inside us. It is to a great degree associated with conscience, which literally means the knowledge that we have within ourselves, the God given knowledge to know what is right and distinguish what is right from what is wrong. So man was created in God's image. He was created as a reasonable creature. And in this sense, he was meant to be distinct from the animals who are governed by instincts and passions. Sin is the product of a failure to reason. Sin always results from pride, and it almost always results, in fact, I would say it always results from a failure to reason properly. So, reason should control the passions. When the passions take over one's conduct or thinking, one behaves irrationally, one fails in his obligations to God, and in fact, a person who gives into his passion behaves like an animal. But again, the animals don't have any choice. They follow their instincts because they don't really have reason. We have reason, and that's what distinguishes us from the animals. And if you give into your passions, if you knowingly choose to give into your passions, you're lowering yourself on the great chain of being. One way that they constantly describe this relationship between reason and passion is to talk about it as a relationship between a rider and a horse. Reason is the rider, the horse is passion. The reason is supposed to keep the passions tightly reined in, tightly under control. If somehow the horse gets out of your control, if you drop the rein and the horse gets the bit between his teeth, then you're in trouble. And that's what can happen when your passions take over your life. Your obligation as a human being is to behave like the rider who controls the horse. Let's go up one and look at use versus abuse. Everything that we have in this life, first and foremost, including our lives themselves, are gifts given to us by God. We can choose to use those gifts properly to glorify God, or we can misuse those gifts and basically glorify ourselves. Ironically, if you glorify yourself, you're probably going to wind up in hell. If you use the gifts that God gives us, especially the gift of reason and intelligence, if you use it wisely, you're like the rider who has got the horse tightly under control.